Hey, this is Cream Puff, multi-legend player and host to the Standard and Wild Ladder strategy podcast Top Deck Kings. However, you are about to listen to Concede. If you haven't bought a kiss into what they are doing over there, then that would be so ridiculous that I need to tell you to keep calm and chive on and core on over and bottom right your listening privileges.
Greetings.
Hello.
Greetings.
My greetings.
Well met.
I greet you.
Greetings, traveler.
Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Concede. My name is Ridiculous Hat. I am your host here on episode 125. Kenny, unfortunately, had internet yesterday and doesn't have internet today, and that's actually pretty important for recording a podcast, but it's all right. We will make this happen. Joining me from Karazhan, California, we've got Botticus.
Hey, everybody.
And joining us from Lordaeron, North Carolina, we've got Zhandaly. How's it going, man?
Good. How's it going, Hat Man? Glad to be on the show.
Thanks for coming on. And just to give everyone a little bit of a show outline here, let's talk about what's going to happen. Well, first of all, our friend Zhandaly, we're going to introduce him. We're going to let you know who he is and why you should listen to him. He's a good dude. Spoilers. We are going to talk about our ladder a little bit. We're going to talk about the news, tournament highlight of Copa America. We got explanations on a very special deck, and we've got a few questions and emails to go over. But first, we just want to let you all know Concede is supported in large part by you, the listener. If you'd like to find out how you can support us and receive rewards in return, head to patreon.com/CoinConcede. And a big thanks to Midgame for your support of the show. Midgame, you're a good dude. All right, Zhandaly. Question 1. How's it going?
It is going, man. Just another day at the office. Came back and ready to talk about some Hearthstone.
Well, you're in the right place. Why don't you give us a brief intro? In case there's people that don't know you by name, who are you, what do you do, and why are you on here?
So my name is Dan. I also go by Zhandaly some places. I run the subreddit called Competitive Hearthstone, or Competitive HS is the actual name of it on Reddit. We're a pretty strict community where we try and foster high-level discussion about playing the game and getting players to play better. Typically through like guides, articles, things like this to talk about gameplay. It's a pretty cool place if you're interested in that kind of stuff and stepping up your game. It's definitely a great place to check out. In addition to that, I've been playing Hearthstone since vanilla, right after all the nerfs happened from beta. That was a crazy time when Leroy cost 4 mana and Handlock was a thing. You had 0 mana Molten Giants and stuff like that. It was crazy. And
So you're saying the good old days
yeah,
when
man,
Leroy
like,
cost 4.
The old
You
days,
could
I
play
don't
it
know.
3 times in a turn.
How good is that? Is that good?
I
you can
loved it.
Shadow Step it twice in a turn, and that's 18 damage for 8 mana, and you stick some Cold Bloods in there, and that's 26 damage in a turn, man. Fun and interactive.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. It
It
was
was
fun to go back and watch on YouTube. I don't know if it'd be fun to experience again.
Honestly, that deck was really fun to play.
Yeah, it was also super or at least it was deemed very skill intensive. There was a lot of things you had to do.
Yeah, there was a lot of you had to match the right cards to the right what they had on their side. You kind of backstab their 1/1. You had to backstab their 3/2. Things like their Knife Juggler. When Knife Juggler was a 3/2 and it was everywhere. Oh man.
Yeah.
Jeez, those are the days.
Also, back when daggering down a Leper Gnome on turn 2 cost you 4 points of life. Yeah. Oh, man. The classic. All right, so how do you pronounce your screen name? Where did it come from? We're going to ask the tough questions first.
All right, man. So my name is, or the screen name is pronounced Zhandaly, and it's a really interesting story. It came from an old friend of mine who I used to play RuneScape with a very long time ago, and he ended up giving me his account, and his account had this name, and well, I played the game for a really long time. It was like a sentimental thing, so I've kind of kept the name going for a while, and that's kind of why it is what it is. So it's a mouthful, I know. Some people have a really hard time spelling it.
Well, no, I've heard a couple people pronounce it Zhandaly and Zhandaly, and I guess I don't know. It does look when you see it typed out, it looks a little easier to pronounce. But I couldn't imagine just hearing it on the street and being like, okay, now try to spell it.
Yeah, try to phonetically spell this, right? Like, but like there's an age-old saying, potato, potato, right? Something like
Right.
that.
Yes, and Zhandaly, Zhandalay.
Exactly.
Growing up, my mom always told me that. I never knew what it meant until now. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
exactly. Everybody has a different way of pronouncing stuff, but that's all right. Yeah, so it's Zandali, and then it's got an H. It's strange. The H is silent. Uh, but yeah, it's a name I've kept around for a while. I'm probably always going to use it in games, and uh, yeah, I'm call me old fashioned, but I'm set in my ways.
well, there's something to be said for inertia behind identity, right? Like, it's if people know you a certain way, there's something to be said about the comfort there. Um, so speaking of using the same name in gaming for a while, what's your background in gaming? I mean, how'd you get into it? What have been some big games you've played over the years?
So I worked with computers from a very young age. My dad was an electrical engineer, and he used to take the old junker computers from like Intel and Lucent and stuff like that, and he would bring them home and give them to us to like mess around with. And so then I kind of got started there. I used to play like Lemmings. If you remember Lemmings, that was an awesome game. I played that a lot.
Oh
I
yeah, that
played
was a classic. You got the dude that like stood at the end of the platform that looked both ways with the arms and the dynamite little lemming.
all
It's
the different functions, and you had to solve the puzzle to get through it. It was really cool, and it was all in MS DOS, man. That was a great time, man. Old days. And then I remember having a Pentium 2 computer. Had Windows 98 on it. I eventually got 2000, man. It was a big jump. And it would take all of my CPU and memory to run this browser Java game called RuneScape. And I played that game for a really long time. But in the meanwhile, at the same time, I also started playing Magic the Gathering, and this was when I was about like 9 years old. And everybody at summer camp used to play Magic the Gathering, and I was like, oh, these cards are pretty cool, but like the cards are really expensive, and my allowance can't pay for this. Everybody's got these elf decks and these black kill decks, and I'm just like, all right, I've got 5 mana 4/3. Check me out.
oh
And
man.
yeah, so I mean, it kind of started there. I always was trying to figure out how to make my decks better and how to get the cards that I needed to be better. And so my card game addiction kind of started there. And over the years, I've quit Magic, gone back to Magic, quit Magic, sold my collection, this and that, gave my collection away. But I always seem to find my way back to it because it's just such an interesting combination of, it's like a strategy game. It's chess pieces. It's like forcing the hand, but at the same time, there's like a variant or a luck element to it, the order of the draw, and Hearthstone to some extent. There's the actual RNG of knife juggler and call to arms and things like this, and it keeps your experience fresh, and there's new cards being created, and it's a living, growing type of game, and the strategy aspect of it always spoke to me, and so I've been on and off playing trading card games for about 15 years now, and definitely my favorite kind of game to play.
You just told the story and cycle of so many Magic players in such a short amount of time because that cycle of I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out is just exactly how the game seems to function most of the time. I thought I was out myself personally, and then the girlfriend got an invite to MTG Arena's beta, so I'm right back in it. It's when you're used to that style of game, and Magic was really the original one. It's so hard to want to break out of it, and even then, just sometimes you just get the itch. Just like I just wanna tap some cards. I wanna spend some mana. I wanna play some stuff. So Hearthstone really stokes that fire. I imagine that that's where you made that transition from Magic into Hearthstone when you got a beta invite.
Well, I actually didn't get invited to the beta. It was really interesting. One of my really good friends that I've been playing Magic with for many years is like, hey, you should try this card game by Blizzard that just came out and got released, and we all kind of picked it up and started playing it. A couple of people in my group, and like we all liked it, but like we all started it. Like I mean, it's like the typical dilemma. Everybody's trying to be free to play, and you're in a world where free to play can be kind of restrictive unless you're spending a lot of time grinding. So I ended up sticking with it for a while because I really do enjoy the card games, and I invested a lot of time into it. I played a lot of Arena at the start to build up my collection, and I started reading stuff to get better. And Competitive Hearthstone happened to be one of those places when it was just first created, and that's kind of how all that started. I just was like participating there and trying to learn and trying to get better at the game, and here we are today. Now I'm trying to get other people better at the game.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be.
Well, and that's where competitive HS comes in, right? We'll talk about that in a little bit, I know, but it's kind of serving a larger purpose because you get to reach so many people at once, and you get to do so without the dankest of memes that the regular Hearthstone subreddit seem to always have in common with each other. Let me not jump the gun. Bodicus, why don't you take over?
So, speaking of of the ever flowingness of Hearthstone, what do you think of the current meta? Do you think that the nerfs were right? Do you like kind of where things are starting to go now?
Oh, absolutely. I think that cards like Quarter Creeper and Patches the Pirate really restricted how decks could be built. It pretty much almost demanded that those cards were run in aggressive archetypes or board-based decks that were trying to fight for the board, because there was just simply nothing close in power level to these cards. And when you have cards in like that kind of a situation, a la Piloted Shredder, Dr. Boom back in the day, it really kind of warps how decks are built in the game and makes it kind of stale and boring because you just see the same old neutral package all the time. Which kind of leads me into Bone Mare's nerf. The card also kind of sort of killed aggro decks that couldn't win before turn 7 consistently, because if you couldn't fight for board and you couldn't keep their board clear on 6, well, guess what? You're probably not hitting face for the rest of the game. So that's not really a great feeling, and it's really restrictive in deck building in that regard too, because these decks had to get really low to the floor. And so that also kind of warped the meta in and of itself. And then what they nerfed Raza? Oh yeah, because that deck was just like crazy degenerate.
I think Hap might have some things to say about a certain 6-mana card that does a similar thing to Bone Mare.
Which one?
Against
Spiteful
the aggro
Summoner?
decks. Yeah.
Well, that's not an anti-aggro card, right? Like that's just a.
Well, he was saying cards like Bone Mare that if you can't beat them before turn 7, then they just stabilize against you, right? Whereas like the Spiteful Summoner decks, if you're stable by turn 6 and you play a Spiteful Summoner against an aggressive deck, there's generally pretty few things that you're going to be able to do to deal with a 4/4 and anywhere from a 6/6 to a 12/12.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Spiteful is like, it's the best high main ever, in that if you play it while you're ahead or on an even board, then you win. And if you play it while you're behind, you're probably still behind unless they high roll. I think in the case of an anti-aggro card, it's more like Lackey Dark Pact. That's the turn 6 play that I'm scared of, because Void Daddy himself is just a straight up brick wall. And I don't know. I think that what I like more about this format, not to take away from Zhandaly here, but what I like more about this format is that the swing plays are all different in what they're good against and what decks have access to them. And like you were saying, Dan, the Bone Mare thing, every deck had it. You had it everywhere. You were playing against that on turn 7. That was the fundamental turn for aggros, that like you had to finish the game by then or be able to win with burn. And now at least the threats have different answers, and there's different ways to counter them. I do enjoy the counterplay there a little more.
So do you think there are any decks right now, Dan, that are too strong? You think there's anything in the format that you still think the power level's a little too high? Anything you're worried about?
I mean, there's differences between the ladder and the tournament scene, because you have the bans and you have like that affects how that kind of a meta. And on the ladder, you kind of have these, like, if you look at like Vicious Syndicate or HS replays, you have these kind of like slices and percentages of like, how likely you are to hit something. And so based off of those, you can kind of choose a deck that's going to be well positioned against like the most of that slice, which is kind of how I came to Dude Paladin through the testing and like figuring out that it was actually going to be good was because, like it really stinks for Warlock. It's that's a real tough customer. But versus Spiteful Priest, for example, my win rate is through the roof. It's like 80 to 85% or something like this lifetime.
Jeez.
And
Wow.
I mean, you just crush this deck. It doesn't matter how many Dusk Breakers they draw. You have way more reload than they have those kind of plays, and typically their win condition is really, sticking stuff to the board early and getting you. But as far as decks that are unfair, like the Warlock seems really powerful, and the real reason that it does is because of cards like Skull and Lackey. These cards are used to, they both generate card advantage. Well, the Lackey generates card advantage because it tutors a card out of your deck and plays it, much like Mad Scientist and Call to Arms. But it just generates so much value for the mana investment. Like you get a 2/2, which is probably worth roughly about, like, we'll call it 2 mana, a little under 2 mana, and then it pulls a 9-drop out that just completely bricks all aggro decks and all kind of board-based strategy, just bricks right off the bat. And half the time you can't interact with it because they just dark packed it right off the bat because they play around your silence. They don't have to, like, like people are playing 2 Spellbreakers in their deck, so what does it matter? They just wait one more turn. Well, actually, one more turn might be enough, but who knows?
Do you think if Voidlord didn't exist, that Lackey wouldn't be a problem?
Absolutely. I think that Voidlord on its own is a pretty cool card, and it works in conjunction with cards like Voidcaller and Wild, and that's like a great place to have high-powered decks. But when you have a deck that can consistently cheat the curve while consistently controlling the board, it turns into something that's really powerful, and to some players may feel bad to play against. And certainly in my case, where my win rate is like 20% versus Control Lock and like 35% versus Cube Lock, it certainly doesn't. It's not a fun playing experience from that. Nobody likes losing, but like at the same time, if you had a deck that straight up beat everything, that's actually broken. So in my opinion, I think it's okay to lose sometimes. And that's kind of what I had to accept when building this deck. Like, there's nothing I could do to make Warlock a better matchup. No matter how hard I try, I would just ruin my other matchup percentages, and it's just like not worth it.
All right.
I just gotta accept it, move on.
Yep. So when it comes to the competitive HS subreddit, how'd you end up becoming in charge of that? Like, yeah, how'd you get there?
So like I was saying before, when I had first started, I was like, I had card game experience, but I had no idea how to actually play Hearthstone. And like I wasn't really adjusted to like the concept of getting mana every turn. And I was just a scrub, I was at like rank 8, and I was like, I could do better than this, I think. And so I was trying to look for some resources and what to read, and I was a big Redditor from college. And so I followed the Hearthstone Reddit, and I saw this new subreddit pop up, this competitive HS. And I went there and I started posting. It was people just talking about the game. It was just like, don't get me wrong, I like memes and I like all that fun stuff. I mess around on Hearthstone quite a bit. But, when you want to get better, you don't want to deal with that. You want to just have the resources and make everything easy. And so I really like that whole premise of competitive Hearthstone and actually just having a place to talk about it. And the guy who made it, actually, that's a really funny story. I'm gonna sidetrack real fast from me. So the whole reason that the dude Slabotic made our subreddit is because he was drunk one night and he was having that same exact thought process, but in like angry drunk mode. And he was like, F this. I'm going to go and make a subreddit where none of these memes are allowed. And I got like a couple of thousand subs overnight, and it was just like really funny. So that's actually the story behind competitive Hearthstone's inception. I mean, it's not publicly told very often, but it's really funny.
It's out of angry and drunk spite, we have a new tranquil place to discuss Hearthstone without memes. Yeah.
The best things come from those moments, man. But I mean, it was just like a moment of passion, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go and do this." And so I ended up posting a lot pretty early on, and he picked me, and he was like, "Hey, do you wanna join my team and run this and help me with the sub?" And I was like, "Sure." And of course, at first, I was like 20 years old, and I was like just another idiot who didn't really know what he was doing, and you know there's always those growing pains, especially we jumped in subscriber count like really fast as more expansions kept coming out and people kept hearing about us. So like we had to quickly adapt and adjust, and it was a big learning experience for me. But I think the big thing is that we have like a really solid team of people that are all kind of aligned on this goal that we want to make this place for people to get better at the game. And if it's not helping people get better at the game, and take it somewhere else.
So speaking of growing, as you're getting bigger, Reddit's kind of known as this place that generates kind of quite a bit of salt, right? It's kind of known as a pretty can be toxic at times, and I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter how Hearthstone's generally one of the better games when it comes to that stuff, but what do you kind of think of that reputation, and what do you try to do over in the competitive HS subreddit to kind of try to be different and not try to not tend to that as much as possible?
So I actually like to tell people that Hearthstone is a game of psychology more so than even sometimes more so than strategy, because when you're playing like if you're really trying to climb and you're playing like 30 games a day, and after your like 10th Warlock game in a row, the guy just tops Defile into top Neither into top Neither. I mean, that feels really bad. You're looking at this, and this guy's got like this X% chance, and he just nails it 3 times in a row. Like, God must hate me, like all this stuff, yada yada yada. But the thing is that like the whole thing is that like you have to understand that like any kind of chance that's greater than 0 is greater than 0. It's a very simple mathematical equation, right? If it can happen, it can happen. Murphy's law.
Oh my God!
Whatever they call it.
Testify. This is perfect.
And so I think that I mean there is some like I think there are some like points for constructive criticism. Like I personally thought that like Patches is a really strong card, and it was, and but like I said, it was literally everywhere for like 2 years, and when Corridor Creeper came out, I mean, I'm still kind of flabbergasted how a 0 mana 5/5 made it through QA. I mean, that's kind of crazy to me, but like this is what I mean. That goes back to cards like Possessed Lackey and current Corridor Creeper, even though it's its attack got gutted. There's these cards that just cheat the mana curve and tempo and kind of break the inherent system of gain a mana crystal a turn. And those are the cards that typically turn out to be very powerful. It just so happens that Lackey is really powered up by this Void Daddy man.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, at least when I try to think about how development saw Corridor Creeper, right? Because when Corridor Creeper was, revealed, almost everybody universally thought that it was whenever one of your minions dies, it reduces it by 1, which is a totally different card. And one of the reasons why I saw it and I was like, this card seems really, really good. And then obviously everybody played it and realized it was almost always a 0 mana 5/5 on turn 3 or 4, and saw all that play. But you got to wonder that so many people saw it as this card that probably wasn't going to be good enough, and then like how did development see the card? Did they look at it and think a similar thing? Because they have to know how it works, right? Because a lot of people just didn't know how it works. So it's pretty interesting to think about how they might have misinterpreted how the card was actually going to work. Because I assume that they play tested it a lot too, right? Like that's part of their job is to play
you
test
see, that's the thing. Like, did they play test it a lot? See, like that's the thing I like to think about is like we have all of these expansions in the standard environment and all of these classic cards, and we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, if not billions. I mean, I'm not going to do the math here, but there's a lot of combinations of decks out there to test, and I think it's impossible to test them all and test everything. But I mean, I'm very happy at least to see that Blizzard didn't wait too long to take corrective action, and it seems like they're following this trend, especially post KFT, where they nerfed the Druid cards after Druid's complete and utter dominance. Like, that was a tier 0 deck that people had every right to be salty about. Those cards were just incredibly powerful, and something needed to be changed. But like, there's a difference between that and, like, people, like, not really looking at their own plays, making bad decisions, and then blaming it on, like, RNG or their opponent. And, like, that's, like, the actual psychology mentality part of it, is that, like, people need to get, like, you need to get into a self-critical mindset, but not, like, and you can't break yourself down either. Like, you can't, like, be your worst enemy, but you have to be able to look at it and say, hey, I made it, I could have done something differently here, and maybe the outcome would have been different. Like, maybe if I had played this Divine Shield instead of the 2/1/1s, I wouldn't have gotten totally wrecked by this Duskbreaker, and I would have had some good gas to follow up. But instead, I don't have a board, and it doesn't look so great anymore. Like, the ability to look back at the decisions that you made in the game and really look and say, hey, did I really do this right? Is something that I think a lot of players who try to be competitive and fail lack. Like, I mean, for example, like, I know, like, several players already have taken my list to Legend, including myself. And I've gotten messages from people saying that, like, they're hard stuck at, like, 5 or 4 with the list. And, like, clearly the list is Legend viable. I mean, there's honestly, there's no doubt in the deck strength at the moment. It's listed as tier 1 across the board on VS for several days now, and it's a good deck. But, like, some players just can't pilot the deck past that rank. And, the only way to explain that is it's very simple. There's a gap in the skill between myself and this player. And, like, the first step to getting better is admitting that, is that, like, I must be doing something wrong, or, like, I'm not, maybe I'm not teching right, or maybe in game I'm not making the correct choices. And there's a whole plethora of depth to it. And that's really what we're all about, man. I really want to get this kind of message out there and get people to think critically, because, I think thinking critically about the game is important if you want to be good.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I actually have a pretty good example of just that whole mentality thing, when you're like, oh, my opponent is so lucky, but you can actually look at your game. As I was playing a game this weekend, I was playing the new, like, this Jade Shaman deck that's been going around that Purple made, and I was in complete control of the game, playing against Combo Dragon Priest. And I had a Gruul that got bigger a couple times, and basically had the entire board. And then in one of the turns, instead of putting a taunt in the way, like I should have done, I played something and evolved it with my Thrall hero power and passed the turn. And my opponent happened to have exactly Twilight Acolyte, a dragon, Potion of Madness, or I had to have Radiant Elemental, Divine Spirit, Inner Fire. Like, had to have all those cards. And it's like, yeah, it sucks that he had, the 7-card combo to be able to kill me. But at the same time, if I had just made the correct play of putting a taunt in the way, then my opponent can't do that. So, like, it's important to be able to review your games and see that, I lost this game not because my opponent was very lucky to have that exact combination of cards. I lost because I played it incorrectly. So I think it's a good point that a lot of people can. There's going to be situations where your opponent gets very lucky, but there's also a lot of those situations that if you had played it correctly, you could have won anyway.
Like, there's a difference between your opponent getting lucky and top decking their out, and, like, you leaving yourself open to their out. And I think a lot of people kind of misinterpret the result of the game, and we'll just kind of attribute it to, oh, my opponent just drew exactly what they needed. And it's like, well, like, did you put them in a position that could like that was the reason that they were able to top it and win out? Like thinking critically about the game itself is really the key to getting better.
Yep, totally agree.
This conversation was like a body of water. I would just soak in it all day. Like I would just be in it because this is the truth, and this is the kind of attitude you should expect to see and bring to competitive HS. So Zhandaly, thank you very
Exactly.
much for the intro. What we're gonna do now? Why don't we talk a little bit about what we're doing on the ladder? Zhandaly, tell us where this mindset has gotten you so far. How's it going on ladder?
So I actually I was doing really well today. I was like 5-0. And I was climbing up Legend Ladder. I went from I think 1100 up to 685, and then I queued this Cube Warlock, and he ended up getting 2 Defiles and a Hellfire, and he got the second Defile at a really timely time. And I didn't hit any of my Divine Favor, so I end up on this last ditch effort. He's at 16, and I make 3/11s and a Blood Knight that's a 12/12. This guy just double facelesses my Blood Knights.
Oh no!
And I draw Steward of Darkshire in an empty hand, 1 damage off lethal, staring down my opponent's reverse lethal. After trudging and slugging through all of this AoE junk, 2 lackeys, 2 packs, the whole 9 yards. He got Doomguards both times, thank God. That's the only reason I even got this far, but 1 damage off lethal, man, almost doesn't count.
I think the only appropriate sound here is. So sad.
You showed me the screenshot of that, and I thought it was a wild game for a second because I was like, "There's giants and blood knights." I've only seen this in wild, and then I realized that you're playing a game of standard.
They were
in
giant
Legend Ladder.
blood
I was
knights.
like, "Oh,
They weren't just giants. They weren't just blood knights. They were giant blood knights. Those were 12/12s. Mountain Giant
Those are
wishes
some
he was
big
that
boys,
big.
man.
Yeah.
yeah."
Well, I'm sorry to hear about that game, but I'm glad to hear about your top 1000 legend. Bodikus, how about you? Tell me how it's going.
So I believe I said I got Legend on Asia last week sometime, and so I haven't really touched Asia since then. Played a lot this weekend, and on Saturday it just felt like I was getting nowhere. I actually fell really far, which I hadn't done in a while, where I fell from like almost the top of rank 1 all the way back down into like the middle of rank 3. And kind of what I've been doing is I'll hit Legend on one server with one deck and then try to hit with a different deck on another server, and I just couldn't get any traction. So I queued up the old combo Dragon Priest for a couple games on NA and went like 14-2 to hit Legend. So yeah, it was I'm really enjoying that deck. Having a lot of fun with it. Had a really sweet game where I played Lyra, and the first 2 cards I got from her were Mind Controls against a Control Warlock. And so right after that, my Draconid Operative showed N'Zoth. And so I took a N'Zoth and then mind controlled 2 Void Lords, and then got to play Unidentified Elixir, which returned a copy of a card to my to whatever died to my hand. So I put that on N'Zoth, and yeah, the Warlock didn't end up winning that game.
So wait, so you took 2 Void Lords, and then you took a N'Zoth, and then you made it so that when N'Zoth died, you got it back, and then you got back 2 more Void Lords.
Well, I didn't have to play the N'Zoth, but yes, I did have a N'Zoth in my hand at the end of the game.
Still had all these.
Yeah,
you had an extra N'Zoth in your combo Dragon Priest deck.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Well,
so that's what I've been doing.
And some say that game is still going to this day. Yeah. Well, I am not nearly as in an impressive situation as either of you fellas because, for those who don't know, I work in a movie theater, and a movie called Black Panther came out this weekend. So
great movie.
I heard it was great. Didn't get to see it. I did get to see a bunch of people enjoying it. And, yeah, so my time has been kind of occupied by being in Wakanda this weekend, so I'm still pretty close to where I was in the ladder last time, rank 5 in Standard, around rank 10 in Wild, and Standard has been... I've been enjoying the opportunity to play with low pressure and trying out a little bit of everything. And I think the deck that I'm enjoying the most right now in Standard is, in fact, Kingsbane Rogue. And I'm going to say it doesn't feel like a mill deck. And I apologize for anyone that I instigate by saying that. But every time I play that deck, I get a big dagger and hit him in the face, and Cold Light Oracle just keeps that engine going while providing my opponent more cards they can't use. But I don't win through fatigue; I win by the knife. So
Okay. Yeah,
that's
and
what I felt.
I am one of the people that calls it a mill deck, and the reason I call it that is not because you try to fatigue your opponent, but because you end up milling some of their cards in the matchups that it's good against. So against Priest and against Warlock, a lot of times you'll mill some of their cards. It's not a method of killing them as much of a strategy. And yeah, basically my argument is just that you play again, if it's known as a mill deck, you kind of have an idea what's in the deck and some of the things that it's trying to do. So you play against it in the sense, if you know that, if you hear, oh, it's a rogue mill deck, you're like, okay, so I know these cards are in it. So my goal is to empty my hand, not try to get too much value, because if I fill up my hand too much, they're going to Cold Light Oracle me and then vanish all the stuff back to my hand, and I'm not going to have a board. So it's not so much that the mill is trying to kill you, it's that by knowing it's a mill deck, you have a general idea of what cards are in the deck and how to play against it.
I mean, if we're talking the basic of semantic familiarity, by all means, I will say when the deck is winning, it feels less interactive than Freeze Mage, because it's this crushing inevitability that you're staring at that 13-5 lifesteal weapon, and you look at the amount of damage you can do each turn, and it's less than 13, and you just know you're going to die. And it's all saps and vanishes and things that slow the game down, so I get the vibe, but I win through fatigue so infrequently that I can understand both sides of the semantic argument. And I think semantic arguments are dumb, so I'm not going to push it too much further. I have been enjoying playing it, unless I'm matched up against Secret Mage or Dude Paladin, in which case I haven't been enjoying playing it. So it's very matchup dependent. I think Dude Paladin might even be worse than Secret Mage, but they're both nearly unwinnable matchups. It's
I have
close.
a 100% win rate versus Kingsbane Rogue, and I've played at least 9 or 10 games, and I played 3 in Legend today. It was really strange. 3 out of 4 of my games were against Kingsbane Rogue, and I easily won all of them. It was a breeze.
Yeah,
I was
the deck just can't compete.
On
Asia, you can't actually kill my stuff, and Vanish only prolongs the inevitable. I'm gonna keep putting stuff on the board and pressuring you, and there's just no way for you to clear. So unless you unless the stars align and you draw Kingsbane into poison, into leeching poison into all of your buffs, if that universe happens, then yeah, I'm probably gonna struggle a bit. But I think I could even possibly beat that.
Yeah, I never got to shout out all the rogues on Asia that I played against, because I think my record was 18-1 with combo Dragon Priest. So yeah, appreciate all the wins, but I think a lot of them were Miracle, but some of them were obviously Kingsbane. Kingsbane definitely feels like a harder matchup than Miracle.
The matchup percentage on Vicious Syndicate has Dude Paladin at 89.2% versus Kingsbane, which I think is literally the most lopsided matchup I've ever seen. It was easier to beat
Control Warrior versus Freeze
I know
Mage,
where you're going.
I think might be more.
But that matchup is easy enough to misplay because the games go longer, so there's more opportunities for a player to misplay. With Dude Paladin versus Kingsbane, there's just no chance because you're dead. I don't know.
On the flip side, if you misplay in a shorter game, that misplay is significantly more punishing most of the time. And
it's true.
I think a misplay anywhere is a mistake, regardless of the length of the game. Maybe your misplay changes the length of the game. Sometimes I've made mistakes where I've ended up prolonging the game unnecessarily because I missed something, and it's come back to bite me several times in the thousands of games that I've played. It's just it's those little marginal percentages that that's the difference between us and pro players, is that they don't make these little percentage errors. They know all of it and they play exactly like they should, or they try and play as best as they should given the percentage.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing you have so much time on turn 1 and 2, right, Hat?
No, I will not be baited. I will not. Let's go to the news. We're gonna go to the news now. In the news this week, Bodicus attempts to bait the host of Concede, and more with Bodicus.
Sorry, the intro like is usually longer and then it just cut off. But anyway, so Wild Fest is happening until March 11th. Currently, the Wild Arena is happening. So if you want to play in an arena run, you will get wild cards offered to you, most likely. Actually seen quite a few really cool posts. I think Wicked Good made a 30-30. I believe that happened, and just seen a lot of cool posts of people doing kind of crazy things over there. So if you want to get a chance to play some wild cards in Arena, now is your chance to do it. Venture into the Wild, I believe, is the Tavern Brawl this week. Those are going to be some wild pre-constructed decks. So that people who may not have a very big wild collection can try out some of the more competitive decks over on the wild side. And then next week, and here I just received a list of all of the decks. So basically you're going to choose a class and it's going to give you a pre-constructed wild deck. So if you choose Druid, you're going to be playing Aggro Druid. Hunter is a mid-range Hunter deck. There's a Secret Mage deck, Silver Hand Paladin deck, probably also known as the Dude Paladin deck, Big Priest, Miracle Rogue, Aggro Shaman, Reno Cruel Zocus Warlock, and Pirate Warrior. So yeah, if you guys have ever been interested in playing any of those wild decks and want to know before you invest some dust into crafting some of the wild cards, this is a great way to be able to do that. And then next week is going to be the Wild Brawliseum. Really looking forward to this because it's right after the ladder reset. It's not quite a Heroic Tavern Brawl, and it's not quite an arena, but it's kind of a mix between the two. Your first entry is going to be free, and then every subsequent entry after that will be 150 gold or $2, just like a normal arena run, and it'll be whether you get 12 wins first or 3 losses, and rewards very similar to arena rewards. So Hat, have you already played this week's brawl, or are you looking forward to Brawliseum next week? What are you looking for with all this Wild Fest going on?
No and yes in that order. No, I have not done the arena this week yet, though I'm excited, especially seeing there's a Miracle Rogue. But also, I'm curious about the Aggro Druid build they have. I know that our good buddy Reganus Prime has done pretty prolifically well with the Soul of the Forest, Haunted Creeper, like Sticky Token Aggro Druid build in Wild. Yeah, there's a lot of good options here. I'm definitely going to try it out and just see what kind of options that Blizzard is using to expose the Wild metagame to people that aren't normally used to it. As far as Wild Brawliseum, heck yeah, I'm going to play it. I actually have already started a Wild Arena run, and I've got a pretty solid deck. I got Paladin, I've got a Happy Rag, and a North Sea Kraken, which I forgot about that guy. He's pretty good.
That card's real good in Arena.
And a Nexus Champion Sarad, which feels like a mini Ysera. If you don't remember that, it's a 5-mana 4/5 neutral, and when you use your hero power, you get a random spell. It can be from any class.
Ooh.
So it's like a mini Ysera, came out in TGT, one of my favorite cards of all time, and is also really, really good in Arena. And I got to pick a Hobgoblin. I was so happy. I got Hobgoblin Stand Against Darkness. So you know that my turn 8 is going to be lit.
Wait, does that work?
I don't know if it's play or
no, it's play.
It doesn't work with like muster or anything like that.
BRB retiring deck.
I did see Dane, the kind of popular Hearthstone wild streamer who always makes the crazy decks, had a Hobgoblin deck with Feral Gibberer in it. And I saw him doing some work with that. It looked like a lot of fun, but I do believe it was play because I don't think it works with like your hero power or anything. Yes, exactly. Heard that a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Hobgoblin was part of one of my favorite standard decks ever back in the day. It was Zhalay's Zoo deck, called Zule, where it was a Hobgoblin, double Sea Giant deck, and then you just jam the entire board as fast as possible, and just fill it up with 1 attack minions that become 3 attack minions, and then just drop Sea Giants and hit him in the face. It was the bluntest force trauma of a deck that I've ever played. You just hit people with big things, and you did exactly one thing, and you did it really well. But it was so much fun to play.
Cool. So Zhandaly, what are you most excited about? Do you do much with Wild? You're muted.
Oh yeah. I'm actually not a big Wild player. I don't really play the format much, and I tell people it's because there's no viable Flamewaker deck at the moment. I have Flamewaker has a very special place in my heart. I played a lot of Tempo Mage before the standard format existed, and I just miss playing with that card in particular. And since Wild can't offer that to me, I'm like, whatever.
Tell that to the
hold
rank
on.
15 Wild players that I played against yesterday, because I think I played against 3 Flamewaker decks yesterday.
So Dan, what
boy.
if I told you that there is a Wild deck with Flamewaker, and that the last time I played it in the mirror match, I dealt 22 damage on turn 6? Because you get to play a Flamewaker deck that tops it at 4, except for this card called Alioneth. And you get to play Frostbolt and Ice Lance.
Those are good cards.
I'll send you a
And
list after the
Primordial
show.
Glyph.
And Mad Scientist,
Those are good cards.
along with Explosive Runes. And yeah, it's the fusion of old and new is better than you might think. I'll send you a list after the show. It's not necessarily tier 1, but it is tier fun.
All right. Well, I like tier fun decks. Tier fun decks are fun.
Well, that's the point. That's why they're in the
Yep.
tier.
That's right.
I'll send you the list after the show. We got you. We got you.
All right, man. I'll check it out.
Yeah,
else we
so
got, Bob?
guys, everyone make sure that you check out Wild Week. I actually, just real quick on Wild Fest, I do like how they're doing it because it feels like it's going to end right around the time that we start getting reveals for the next set. So it's kind of like, here's the last of Wild as it is before a big rotation is going to happen. So I kind of like how they're lining everything up here. I think it's going to be a fun next few weeks. I'm looking forward to the Wild Brawliseum as a way to increase my amount of gold, hopefully, if I can do well enough, and maybe get a few extra cards in there as well. The last little news item we have here is they had another off-meta spotlight on the Hearthstone official website. Couple cool decks being played at High-ish Legend. Looks like there's a Woke Lever deck. Shout out to 1600 Dust.
I should have known that was coming, but here we are.
Posted here, and then looks like another little variation on Purple's Jade Shaman deck that's got Kalamos in it, so it's got a bit more of the elemental package going on here. I've been playing a bit of the Shaman deck, and if you're looking to have a lot of fun, I suggest this deck a lot. If you're looking to win a lot, then I would go with Stan Sifka, and also say that not so much with the Shaman right now. And then looks like the last one in here is a big beast hunter deck that looks pretty sweet. I think I've seen a couple lists like these. I know Kibler was playing a similar deck to this. It's got a violet worm in there, which is pretty sweet. Pulling that with like a Kathrina or Barnes seems like it could be pretty cool. But yeah, definitely check this out. We have a link in the show notes for you to check out these cool decks. Definitely look like a lot of fun to play. I don't know, have you guys seen any of these decks on ladder?
On ladder, no, but both Ziggy Sarah and Cinder Ascendant, shout out to them, have been champions of Crush Hunter for a while now. And I really like the Violet Worm edition because sometimes you just get on turn 4, you fill your board with little 1/1 beasts, and that's pretty good. We've got other decks in the format going to fill the board with 1/1s, and this just does it in one turn. And I will say, I share your experience with Grumble Mumble Shaman, as I have been calling it, because you grumble and you mumble. I guess it's a murmur, but I like Grumble Mumble because it rhymes. And Freshka built a version of this as well. It is one of the more fun things you can do in Hearthstone right now. Not necessarily the best, but one of the most fun things. And the rank 5 floor is a good place to do this, and occasionally tilt someone off the face of the earth by being Weirdo Gatekeeper. So
Yeah, the shaman deck, when you're winning, it feels so great. It's like you're just like, oh man, I'm winning with shaman. This feels amazing. And then when you play against the Q block that plays a giant on turn 4, and you don't have the hex in your hand immediately, and then they faceless at the next turn, feels real bad.
yeah, well, and
Feels real
Freshka's
bad.
version, it plays 2 Cold Light Oracles. So after that Warlock taps a couple times, you just make sure that they draw a couple more cards they weren't planning on. And there was one game I played where I milled Skull, Dark Pact, and then he
Ooh,
conceded. It was a good one.
feels good.
It did for me. I can't speak for my opponent. They didn't stick around.
Zandalay, have you seen any of these decks up there in the legend ranks?
Yeah, I'm scarred by that deck that runs Scourge Lord Garrosh, the Recruit Warrior.
Oh yeah.
I've actually queued into the mill version that's running the Double Deadmans and Cold Light Oracles.
Oh
And
man,
that
and
one I
the
think is a little spookier because they
and the
cycle really
Pyromancer.
hard.
Pyromancer also seems pretty good against Mr. Dude Paladin deck.
Well, and that
Oh yeah,
button
it's pretty spooky.
that says click this button and all the recruits die is pretty good against a deck that's all recruits. Like as soon as Scourge
Yeah,
Lord Garrosh comes down, I think that's it's probably a better use of your time to just end the game.
I actually did manage to beat one once. It was a really tight game, but like I mean like the stars really have to align for you once that guy comes out. But it's like you were saying before with you know, guy had the 7-card combo and got there. It's pretty much what I did to this other guy.
Turns out the control warriors generally have quite a few cards in hand, so I imagine Divine Favor is probably reasonable against them.
Oh
Divine
yeah,
Favor is
but
never reasonable. It's an unreasonable card. All right.
Great. So that is our news section, short and sweet. Hopefully, we're going to get some more news. I'm expecting some announcements, or even just announcements of the new set pretty soon. So looking forward to talking about new cards here in a month or so.
Yay, new cards, and more importantly, rotation of old cards.
Yep.
Both are
yeah,
important.
based off of their model that they have so far, it looks like we're gonna get something every 4 months, and it's usually at the start of the month, like the first or second week.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the first Thursday in April, but it might be the second, or it could be the first Tuesday in April. But they've typically done either the first or second Thursday in a month, and yeah, that cycle is usually the April, August, December, 4, 8, and 12. So it'd be pretty surprising if they broke out of that, but we'll see what happens. But we don't even have an announcement of an announcement of an announcement, so we're not going to speculate here. We're just going to see what happens. What we do have are some tournament results. So why don't we check out those?
It's the grand tournament!
So let's talk about Copa America. Now, this is the second tournament in the post-nerf meta, the second major tournament, the second major tour stop. And we have a winner. It's Raz, R-A-S-E, from Brazil. He took the finals over Pincha in a top 8 that included in 3rd and 4th place, we have Galaden 99 and Perna. In 5th through 8th place, we have Sehun 628. Sorry, buddy. Hope you make it next time. We have Phenom, we have Yunus, and Ariador. I'm sure I pronounced all those terribly, but hey, we tried. So as far as the tournament meta, we've got continuing evolution. We obviously have a lot of Warlocks. That's not new. And what is interesting is that we're trending towards control over Cube. There's a lot of metagames where people are banning Cube, and if not, they're usually targeting it, a lot of times by attempting to go under them or attempting to go over the top. So if you're attempting to go under them, you want to be playing the control list, and then Rin often can stop the combo decks if it is fast enough. So a lot of these lists are N'Zoth and Rin based, but the Cube builds are still around. But we're seeing more popularity and actually a little bit more success from the N'Zoth control variants. As far as Mage goes, Mage is the big winner. And it's not the mages that you might expect, because we've only got 2 secret mages, but we have 12 control mages. 5 of them are big spell control, which has Medivh and Dragoncaller Alana, but by far the most popular variant is popularized by Be Quiet in HCT Germany last week, is N'Zoth Control Mage, N'Zolagosa as I call it, because it plays N'Zoth, Zola the Gorgon, and Syndragosa. And this is really just a long game value mage with tons of AoE and threat generation through Syndragosa and Pyros, and you get back the plated beetles, and you've got all kinds of value throughout the game, and then you just N'Zoth it all back. So it's really meant to grind out the opponent, and it's very, very good at it. It was quite successful, and Raze, the winner, ended up playing this in the finals and winning with it. There's also was one quest mage, but it didn't work out in the top 8, even though it made it to the top 8, and that was Phenom, and his lineup was Q Block and Triple Quest. He had Quest Druid, Quest Rogue, Quest Mage. Unfortunately, he lined up against a more aggressive opponent, but there is a world where that would have succeeded, and he did get to the top 8, so you know what? More power to him. As far as the priests, we've got 12 of those, 4 combo dragons, 4 spiteful dragons, 1 regular dragon, and then 3 big priests. So it's kind of interesting seeing the direction that's going. There's not really any committed plan there, but I would guess the combo dragons are probably not looking to ban Warlock, and the Spitefuls probably are. But it really depends. Each strategy can be a little bit different based around what else you bring. Now, as far as Paladin goes, we're again seeing a very controlling meta here. We've got 12 Paladins. 2 were OTK, much like Asmodee's deck, where it relies on Auction Master Beardo, double Burgly Bully, and a Control Shell. And they usually play Linessa Sunsorrow, so that your Spike Grid Steeds and your Potions of Heroism all come back. It's a pretty interesting tech, and it's really good about fending off aggressive decks most of the time. We've got 6 N'Zoth control builds, because Call to Arms is just as good getting Dirty Rats and Wild Pyromancers as it is when it's getting Righteous Protectors and various little fish. And we still have 4 Murloc Paladins, but it seems like it was targeted pretty heavily. Look at the amount of control here. Murloc Paladin's good, but I don't know if it's that good against all these AoE into AoE into AoE. Now we've got some wacky decks too, right? We have a Spiteful Druid, we have a Quest Druid, we've got a Spell Hunter, we've got a Quest Rogue, and then 2 Evolved Shamans and 2 Control Warriors with Dead Man's Hand. So you can see everyone is looking to exhaust. The format is very, very slow. The most played legendary period is N'Zoth, which is a very different world than where we were even 3 weeks ago when it was Patches by far. And the most played epic, it's not Corridor Creeper, it's not Sousy Captain, it's Skulking Geist. Of all the cards to be the most played epic, this is not what I was expecting to see, but you think about it. First of all these slow decks don't ever want to deal with the Jade Idol. Second of all, you don't really want to deal with Dark Pact or Inner Fire either. And if you're able to remove those cards, Skulking Geist has really gone up in value because a lot of these slower decks depend on cheap utility spells. Or in the case of Combo Dragon Priest, that's your kill condition. And if you get rid of it, there's just one Crazed Alchemist you have to worry about, and that's often not enough to close out the game. And as far as the most played rare, what a world we live in. It's good old get out of my jungle. It's Stonehill Defender. So we're in the value-based metagame, one of the slower metagames we've seen in a while as far as tournaments. It's definitely different than a ladder. The ladder, I think there's a little bit more room for aggro to grow, but something interesting to see that when you ban Warlock or if you ban Paladin, a lot of times you can bring your decks in a different direction than you would normally do on the ladder, and it's pretty effective to slow down a little bit. Now, as far as games to watch, I will say that this tournament was one of the more fun ones to watch in a long time. The players were all really, really expressive. You could see when they were happy, you could see when they were sad, you could see when they were tilted. And the commentary, I listened to most of the commentary in Portuguese. Now, I don't speak Portuguese, but I will say the energy of the language was a lot of fun to experience. The series that I most recommend you watch, that has the most ups and downs, is in the top 8. It's Yenis versus Gladen 99. We have a link in the show notes. Again, it's in Portuguese, but it is a 3-0 sweep, but it's the most stressful sweep I've seen in a long time, and those 3 games took 75 minutes. The average game volume there is pretty intense, and Game 1 was a 40-minute Big Mage Mirror. Game 2 was Spiteful Priest versus Token Shaman. That was the shortest game at 15 minutes. And Game 3 was 25 minutes of Control Paladin versus Token Shaman. It was really, really close, and it's really worth your time if you just want to watch some fun Hearthstone. Really tight play. There were some small mistakes from both players, some larger mistakes from both players, but it was just more fun to never know where the game was going to end up, and I'd strongly recommend checking it out. As far as next week, well, HCT Sydney is the next tour stop, and we'll be covering that in depth. And that's all we've got for tournaments. Bodicus, were you able to catch any of this?
I wasn't, but talk about one end of the spectrum to the other, from Patches to N'Zoth. I think those are pretty much the 2 most opposite ends that you can possibly get. And the fact that Stonehill Defender is the most played rare really kind of just shows you how much things have shifted in the competitive scene since the nerfs. So these N'Zoth control mages look really interesting. I've seen a couple floating around. I've seen a couple people playing them. Seems like a really cool deck. It's just like full of value. So definitely something looking into. I played a bit of the OTK Paladin after I hit Legend. That deck feels really strong if I wasn't so terrible at playing it. So I like that a lot. But yeah, sweet tournament. It'll be interesting to see kind of how people shift things after seeing this meta coming up in the future tournaments. Kind of wonder if people are going to try to slog together an aggro lineup to fight all the expected even slower or more combo-y decks, or kind of if people just end up going with like a quest mage lineup or something along those lines. It'll be pretty interesting.
Or if we see Kingsbanes. Lord knows.
Maybe some Kingsbane.
Could see some Kingsbanes. Who knows? And yeah, it's been so interesting to see the shift as well from region to region and from week to week. So I'm really curious about what we see next week. Dan, what do you think about the tournament meta? Did you see this coming?
No. I mean, I knew that people would be trying. I thought that people would be trying to ban Warlock and bring these like crazy aggressive lineups. But hearing like N'Zoth is the most played Legend and Stonehill Defenders the most played Rare, those are all like crazy outlandish things that I probably would not have guessed, to be honest with you.
And Skulking Geist is such a weird epic to be the most popular epic. It's like
when I saw it, I was
what
like,
happened?
this can't be right. There's no way this can be right. And number 2 was Dirty Rat, by the way. Like, what world do we live in?
That makes a lot more sense to me, Dirty Rat. But the fact that Skulking Geist is more makes me a little sad, because I want Combo Dragon Priest to be a deck that you could play in a lineup. But if Skulking Geist is that popular, it doesn't seem like something you want to be doing.
Yeah. Well, so that's all that we've got for the tournaments this week. And Bonikus, we've got a couple iTunes reviews. Why don't you take us through that while I play this little transitional here?
Whoa, you're the most heavy metal thing I've ever seen!
So thank you so much, everybody who left a review on iTunes. It really helps us out so much with everything. We're going to read out a couple of reviews here. The first one titled My New Favorite HS Podcast by Matt Jans. It says, the guys on the show do a very good job of explaining decks and play strategy. Very entertaining podcast. Quickly became a must listen on my weekly list. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, Matt. Really glad that you are enjoying the show. We hope that to continue to put out, the highest quality content possible, and keep it on your weekly listen list. The next review we have here, titled Fun and Informative by Manji1, says, this is a great podcast with an excellent mix of information and entertainment. All of the hosts are on point. I really like the Sports Center tournament recaps by Hat. That's awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm really glad that people are liking your tournament recaps.
Yeah,
because you do a really good job. You put a lot of work into them.
Aw.
I like them too.
I'm gonna cry. And then we've got one more. Come for the Hearthstone, stay for the puns. Don't mind if I do. That's from B Squatch. I listen to a lot of Hearthstone podcasts, and Concede is easily my favorite. It's fun, it's insightful, and most importantly, it'll make you a better player. The hosts are crazy knowledgeable and do an excellent job of breaking down the competitive side of Hearthstone. They do in-depth deck analyses, tournament recaps, and sometimes mixed up with very cool guests, like this week. But wait, there's more. They also host a Discord community that is full of the most friendly, supportive, and all-around amazing people. Keep up the great work, and if I see you on the ladder, I know what to do. I'm glad we have trained you well, my friend. Thank you so much to everyone for the review. Again, it really helps other people find us, so we appreciate all the energy you put into keeping the show going. And now, speaking of knowledgeable special guests, the dude himself has some words to tell us about Dude Paladin. Here we go.
All right, Zhandaly. So the first question I have to ask you is why? Why did you have to make this deck? Here I am over here playing my combo Dragon Priest against Murloc Paladins, and I'm like, oh, all I need is like a Potion of Madness and a Dustbreaker, and I can win that matchup, pretty regularly. I don't have to worry about this thing. And then I start seeing this list pop up, and I hear your name, and I hear Muzzy's name, and all of a sudden there's just these boards after boards of 1/1s coming out, and if I leave any of them up for even a turn, I'm just dead because they get buffed or something happens and I just lose. So where did you come up with the idea for this deck? Where did the spark come from for this deck?
So, I mean, the deck itself isn't totally an original concept. There's a very prominent deck in Wild, which was playing these cards, and like when cards like Level Up and things like that came out, it was like pretty crazy. I was like, there's definitely going to be some kind of deck in Wild using Muster for Battle that can abuse the Silver Hand strategy and really take advantage of it. And then I thought to myself, well, if Standard is just like a watered down version of Wild, pretty much, then there must be some Standard version of this deck which also exists and works. And so I began playing around with the concept a little bit. Before the nerfs were even announced, actually, I started playing with the deck, I think, on January 7th. And then I like publicly shared it on CompHS Discord on the 9th. And yeah, I got a lot of people doubting me and stuff. Didn't really think it was going to be very good. Didn't think it was worth playing, so on and so forth. I kept testing it. I actually was it was funny. I originally started with like the pirate package and creepers and everything, and I ended up cutting the pirate package before I even knew it was getting nerfed. Because like it just turned out that having deck slots was such a huge commodity that I just didn't feel like running the pirate package. It was really strange.
So yeah, no, just so what are the good matchups? So what you started playing the deck, what did you find that it was beating consistently? What were you trying to target something with a deck like this, or did you just think it was like a better version of the Murloc deck?
Pre-nerfs, it was like it had a very similar matchup spread, except the problem was that Corridor Creeper existed, so every deck had a possibility to swing on you, and you sometimes just didn't have your Creeper or whatever to answer it, and you just kind of like lost there. But the idea is that once the nerfs happen, and patches also was a huge bane to the deck because every deck had this like free tempo 1/1 that you were trying to beat, and it was like really difficult to get onto the board earlier as a result. So when the nerfs actually happened, even though the deck lost Corridor Creeper, it actually was really profitable for the deck because most of the board-based decks in the game, the board-based decks would be using patches like almost 100% of the time. And so now that those decks aren't playing that card anymore, it becomes really easy for you to kind of start developing a board from turn one and slowly get on there. So after the nerfs, I found it was doing really well against these board-based decks because they could no longer clear off like the turn one Divine Shields, and they couldn't trade into the dudes. It was just a lot more difficult, and they had to invest more resources in. And as you were saying, man, this deck just keeps going and going and going, and it doesn't stop. So the second you stop being able to remove these cards, you run into a really bad situation and end up losing. So my deck tries to target these board-based aggressive decks. And kind of turn the corner in the mid game with these high value cards like Blood Arms and Stand Against Darkness. So then you use cards like Level Up or Stegadon or Terram to finish your opponent off. Now the problem is that my deck strategy is entirely based on pushing damage from the board. You have to establish a board, win the board, and then you have to use that board to do damage and snowball. So what you really need, and why Warlock is so good against it, is you need multiple ways to AoE the deck. And you need multiple ways to get around like the stickier boards like the Divine Shield minions, and classes like Priest and Warlock have access to these cards like Shadow Word Horror and Defile, Twisting Nether and Psychic Scream are all very effective cards at removing my boards and making my life a little bit miserable. Because it doesn't matter how resiliently you build the board against these decks, they're just going to wipe you anyway. And as far as matchups go, you would think that decks with AoE are going to be favored, but because you have all of these reload cards, it's really not. So the Spiteful Priest matchup, which everyone's like, oh man, they're going to get 4 Duskbreakers. This is terrible. Where this deck isn't going to be good. The reality is more along the lines of like, yeah, they Duskbreaker you, but then you just play either Call to Arms or Stand Against Darkness immediately afterwards, and they're just sitting there shrugging their shoulders like, crap, what do I do?
Yeah, and if they ever play like a Steward of Darkshire that you're not able to remove before, they start making those Dustbreaker looks like a terrible card when you're
Yeah.
it's
Duskbreaker
so
doesn't
bad.
against Divine Shield, my man.
Yeah, it's I have won that matchup a couple times, but it definitely involves multiple Potion of Madnesses plus multiple Dustbreakers plus them not having like Tarim on a key turn or whatever. Like it's it's crazy good. I definitely like the idea of the deck a lot. So when you're looking at this deck, let's start from the beginning. So when obviously it depends on matchup, but like what are you looking for in your opening hand for the most part? What are you looking to do to start out the game?
So according to the stats on HS Replay, you really want to be looking for Call to Arms and a 1-drop. There's 6 1-drops in the deck, and pretty much all of them are serviceable on 1, though I typically prefer Squire and Lost over Protector because Protector is a very high utility card, and like sometimes you get some good utility from playing it on turn 1, but I find that it usually comes best in the mid game because it's just like a really annoying roadblock for people to get through when they're playing these kind of taller strategies where they're not going as wide on the board. And against those decks, it can be a very powerful tool. So I usually will sometimes toss it away. But it varies from matchup to matchup, and depending on what you really need. For example, versus the faster decks in the game, you're looking for those early 1-drop minions. Or Lost in the Jungle is definitely one of your best cards. Call to Arms is pretty much you just always want it. I'm gonna kind of not mention it going forward because you just always want it. And then against aggressive decks, you want to get the Weapon Rallying Blade. And the reason I picked that one over Maul is because 3 attack kills Murlocs and Secret Mage minions, and 2 attack from the Maul does not. You have to trade a dude, and trading trading means you're removing your board because your guys have 1 health for the most part. Against some of the slower decks, especially against Priest, I look for cards like Favor, Terran, Dragulch Jailer, just like cards that are going to let me play a slower game plan and do well overall. Sometimes even keep a quality versus Priest because like sometimes the Spiteful Priests get on the board like really early with their Northshire play into like Talon Priest and Tark Reaper and stuff. And sometimes it's just really important to even get the board early there. So using the quality there can be important. You always have Tarim to deal with the Spiteful turn. So against like Warlock, I'll keep cards like Steward of Darkshire so I can try and build more like sturdy boards that are a bit more resilient to either Defile or Hellfire. But Warlock is kind of tough. But for the most part, you're looking for Call to Arms and 1-drops.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was wondering because I did actually a coaching session a couple days ago with with Mage Death, and we were trying out your actual initial version of Dude Paladin, and we came up against a Secret Mage, and we're looking at the opening hand, and I was like, I think you're supposed to keep Rallying Blade because I assume it's Secret Mage, but because we were on the play and we had no 1-drops, so I don't know like how aggressive are you mulliganing with this deck? Like if you don't have a 1-drop, can you still keep a card like Rallying Blade, or do you really need to have the 1-drops and then look for the cards that are going to be good in the matchup?
So this is a kind of there's no glove that fits all the situations, but I can give a general idea. So like when you're on the play versus Mage, for example, you really want to have that 1-drop, but because it's kind of disruptive to their plan, it gets you onto the board and they can't usually ping off. None of the 1-drops are pingable by Mage. Lost is 2 bodies, and all the other ones have Divine Shield, and you have 6 of them. So you also have kind of more reasonable odds of getting one back if you toss on the draw. Like you can keep the blade and toss the rest, especially because you can coin the blade on 2 to answer like Worm or the Arcanologist. But on the play, you kind of want to establish a foothold on the board more. So depending on if you're 100% sure it's Secret Mage, then like keeping blade can be correct because even if you miss on the 1-drop, you have a comeback mechanism. But like if you're not totally sure, sometimes just having the one drop is just better when you don't really know what it is, so you can get the damage in if it's big spell mage, or you can just fight for the board in general. So there's no like hard, fast, definite correct answer, but I find that more often than not, I'll keep Rallying Blade in that kind of a situation.
Okay. So would you say Secret Mage is probably like a favored matchup?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I would think so too. But
Yeah.
so when you're looking at some of your more unfavored matchups, what are some things you can do to try to increase your percentage to try to eke out wins against your bad matchups?
I don't know, man. There's like the thing is that I don't think there's really a lot of different ways you can play to beat Warlock. Like even when you try hard to beat Warlock, they still beat you. There's not really much you can do there. But what I recommend to players is to really look at the Murloc Paladin matchup very closely. There are a lot of people who have told me that this matchup is unfavored for my deck and that a Murloc Paladin is just better. From the beginning of time until now, even while now it's now being played in the meta, people are saying they're having trouble against Murloc Paladin. But the win rates at higher ranks are showing that this deck is better than Murloc Paladin. And I really, and from playing a show mat, or like, I played 10 games against one of my legend buddies, where he was on Murloc and I was on Dude. And I was on the coin 8 times, and I still won 4 out of the 10 games. And like being on the play as like a board tempo deck like Paladin, and they have like pretty much the same tools as you, but better bodies early, so they can snowball on the board much faster. And you have to really think ahead on your plays, and the weapon is really important in that matchup. A lot of that matchup comes down to both players knowing how to play each side of it. But I think my deck has an edge because it just has more gas and more comeback tools. It's just not, like it's a tough matchup to play correctly. And understanding your tools and how they line up against theirs is really how you eke out the percentage in that one.
Okay. That's all really good information. Yeah, I think it's kind of crazy how much you get for going second. Like you get the extra card and the coin, and it's still just so important to be in a deck like that to be going first because you just have all of this initiative and you can dictate so much stuff on their board. But so say you're on the draw, you find yourself a little bit behind on board. Is there anything you can do to kind of play from behind? Do you have any suggestions, like when you start to fall behind on board on things you can do to try to catch back up?
Yeah, so against the aggressive decks, your best way to get onto the board is a weapon. It usually goes 2 for 1, sets you up in a reasonable position for the mid game. But Call to Arms and Stand Against Darkness are these good big swing cards that kind of just fill the board up with strong minions or minions that have to be answered. Like you'll pull Divine Shield minions and Knife Jugglers and Dire Wolves from your Call to Arms, and you just plop 5 recruits with a really relevant tag onto the board with Stand. And your opponent pretty much has to do something about it. Usually, it involves them not hitting your face and trading in. And like a lot of the time against decks like Secret Mage, they only have like 1, 2, or 3 minions at a time unless they have this like crazy draw. So they don't have the efficiency to be able to clear off your guys, and they're wasting time hitting your minions and not your face. So that's buying you time to reach that later phase of the game. Use your value cards and kind of retake the board and then snowball and win. So I guess as far as coming back. Like you have to really think in advance and play smart, because this deck has like a really, really lackluster opener. You're mostly pressing the hero power button on 2 and 3 a lot of the time. And you making sure you can plan around that and understanding what your opponent is going to do is half the battle.
Speaking of pressing your hero power, Divine Favor seems like a pretty important card in this deck. So how I know Hat loves to hear that, but so how do you kind of balance that, trying to get rid of cards in your hand to make Divine Favor good while also making sure you maximize using your hero power so that you don't just get completely outvalued in the game? Like, how do you strike that balance?
So, it all comes from the perception of the card and how it's used in the deck. Like, people see Divine Favor and they always think about these aggro paladins that kind of just dump their hand and draw a bunch of cards. But this deck doesn't exactly play like that. It's a mid-range deck in nature. It's not very aggressive. you don't really you have a lot of some of these higher cost cards that aren't so easy to get out of your hand, and they're not always cards that you just kind of want to jam out just because you want to draw an extra card or two. And so I'm finding that a lot of the time, drawing 3 to 4 cards off Divine Favor is perfectly fine in this deck because there's often enough value to get you there. And I mean, there's certainly situations where you end up drawing 5 or 6 cards and it's great and it works out. But I don't think that you should go like super crazy into it. And I think there's even like I've even found some benefit of like not playing my hand as if the card isn't there, even though it is. And my opponents kind of take the bait and play a little bit slower. And then I just kind of have like one turn on turn 7 or 8 where I play like 2 small cards in favor and draw like 5 or 6. And that could be a pretty cool swing. But like, yeah, don't get too greedy with it. Don't treat it like an aggro deck where you need to draw 6 cards. You draw 3 or 4 cards, you're happy.
Yeah, it's honestly from playing the deck and my experience with it is limited. It feels a lot like Zoo and Divine Favor, just kind of like all your life taps stapled together. Like, because you think about it with Zoo, you life tap in a lot of games. It's only like 2 or 3 times. Sometimes it'll be 5 times. Sometimes it'll be 6 times if the games goes longer. But it's just kind of this refueling mechanism that instead of doing it incrementally over time, you do it all at once. And you've got so many of these options in the deck. The combo of the deck building strength of including Divine Favor and Call to Arms in your deck means that it's really difficult to run out of gas, which is why both Murloc and Dude Paladin are doing so well. But you also look at cards like Stand Against Darkness. That's a lot of oomph in one card. And if you just hold that Stegodon because your opponent played a Dustbreaker, you still have the Stegodon in your hand. Like, the Stand Against Darkness is still pretty powerful. So it's been pretty impressive to watch that you're so much focused on value and you just give all you guys bubbles and then trade into their guys, or you equality and bump down their board. It's really about controlling the board more than anything else, and it's felt very different from what I anticipated, which is, Murloc is a lot more aggressive. It's a lot more about just building a world where you can go face and then doing that efficiently over a couple turns till your opponent dies.
Yeah, the Murloc deck, and it's interesting, and I think that's the reason that it was played more for a really long time, is that, it has this kind of, like, my deck, like I said, has kind of a weak opening game. You're not really getting onto the board and having these crazy aggressive starts where you kill your opponent on turn 6. I think I've only done it once, and it's because, like, my priest opponent literally did nothing for 5 turns, and I killed them on 6 by tearing like 6 minions or something. And like, that's kind of like an anomaly game. Like that doesn't happen. Like how often does your opponent do nothing for 5 turns while they're not AFK? Like, they're not AFK. So it's like kind of tough to have that happen. But like, this deck isn't killing people fast. The Murloc Paladin has the ability to kill people fast with the War Leader into Megasaur curve with any 1 and 2 really. You can put a lot of pressure on a Warlock this way before they can get their Lackey online, and sometimes just go under them and kill them. And this deck doesn't have that potential, which is why it has a significantly worse percentage versus Warlock.
Okay. So are there any tech cards? I saw your initial list, and then I saw a newer list where you, like, I think you tried to put in an extra equality and a consecration, and then you just kind of showed me a new list with Blood Knight in it. So what kind of tech cards can we kind of include if we're trying to beat something specifically, or do you recommend any tech cards, or just what's your opinion on tech cards? What cards would you remove to fit them, and why did you remove Crystal Lion? Because I thought that card looked good. It felt really strong.
Crystal Lion seems good on the surface, and it definitely has potential to be good. I wanted to try other stuff and couldn't figure out what to cut. And Crystal Lion just felt like the least memorable card in the deck. Like, I just don't remember it ever really outright winning me a ton of games. Like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't really like a dead card, but it wasn't it didn't feel like it was an integral piece of the puzzle. So from there, that and the Maul, for the reason I was talking about earlier with the 3 attack versus 2 attack. It's very important to be able to deal 3 damage in a world where Murloc Paladin and Secret Mage exist. And so, just for that entire reason, Rallying Blade gets the edge, even though, realistically in a token deck, these Mauls have really powerful effects. But I got burned by Taunt Maul like 5,000 too many times. No exaggeration, wink, wink. And I finally just one day was like, all right, I'm going to cut this and try other cards. But I mean, before I go on and talk about the tech choices, the deck is still in refinement. I mean, I don't really know what the optimal 30 is, and things have been floating in and out. So, but the 1.5 stock list that does have that Maul in it, you can kind of just play with that and remove the Maul and the Lions and kind of put whatever else you want in. I guess, for example, like with other decks, if you're trying to beat like Zoo, Murloc, Paladin, or the Mirror, cards like Sea Giant can be really powerful in place of the Lion because they also get to work with the advantage of your opponent's board. And although usually in those matchups there's heavy trading, but like, at some point you play Stand Against Darkness and they've got like 3 or 4 minions, and all of a sudden your Sea Giant costs 0. Or like you're playing Call to Arms and it reduces the cost by 3, which doesn't reduce Lion's cost typically. Let's see. Decks like Combo Priest and Spiteful Priest. In general, if you hate Priest, if you really want to beat Priest, just play 2 Equality always. That card is really, really crucial in the Priest matchup. It's why it's in the deck at all, and definitely a good choice. If you really hate Warlock and all you're seeing is Warlock, you can try things like Blood Knight and Spellbreaker. Now, Blood Knight seems like a really strange choice. Why do you want to take away your Divine Shields from their things? Now, the interesting thing I was thinking about is that, like, my boards keep dying regardless of how I set them up with Divine Shields and the Defile math, because he just finds some way to make it work. He either plays the 2-1 or he plays Mortal Coil or whatever. And boom, there goes the Dynamite. So, like, if I just play this giant 6/6 or 9/9 minion really early, like, Warlock really can't answer that. Nobody's really playing Blast Crystal Potion, and not many people are playing even Siphon Soul, and if they are, it's usually 1 copy. So I wanted to see if this Blood Knight could be a possible early tall threat against Warlock. I mean, it's totally experimental. I have no idea if it works or not, because I've played like 3 games with it. And so far in one game, it just turned into 2 12/12s on my opponent's side, and that felt really bad.
I'm going to call that a statistical outlier. That's what I'm going to call it.
Yeah, I'm just going to call that one an anomaly. But the last one, and this was like in the original list that I had circulated, and this is kind of a meme card, but it was actually kind of neat to have, was Dino Size. Dino Size and its little brother Blessing of Kings is a good budget choice as well, and I've heard people have success with that. But Dino Size was really cool because not only is it like a super Timmy card that just makes a giant dinosaur dude, but it's 9 damage from hand that like almost nobody plays around. And I don't know if you saw this video, but this dude in Japan played my list to Legend, and like, he was against a Zoo, and the guy had 13 life, and he had 1 dude in play, and the Vine Cleaver equipped, and he's got this Dino Size casually sitting in his hand, and he gets lethal with it for Legend. It was such an epic clip, man.
I have to check that out because that sounds hilarious.
Oh,
I've
man.
definitely been Dino Sized. I don't know if it was this deck specifically, but it feels so bad.
Oh my god, it's so funny.
So do you think this deck is a tournament viable deck? Do you think people should be trying to add it to their lineups? What kind of lineup do you think this deck could go in? Is it like a build around deck, or can it just slot into anything? What's your thoughts on this in the tournament meta?
So what's interesting is that this deck mirrors Murloc Paladin's matchup spread in a lot of ways, except it's slightly more polarized in that you really beat Secret Mage harder. You really beat the Priest variants much harder because I feel like the Murloc decks actually do fold to Duskbreaker quite a bit more often because they have a hard time rebuilding the board if their board gets nuked. So they rely pretty heavily on that snowball and then the opponent not having that card. Whereas my deck can fight through Duskbreaker over and over and over again consistently. And that's what really sets my deck apart in that matchup. But on the converse side, like we talked about earlier, the Murloc Paladin is much more favored versus the Warlock deck. Well, not like it's not like favored for them, but they're like in a much better position to win than my deck is, simply because their plan can go much faster. And so in the tournament scene, there's the interesting concept of the ban. because if you just remove this deck's like completely abysmal Warlock matchup, then like the decks that I would expect to see, given what I'm seeing on the ladder, would ultimately be really beneficial, a really great field for this deck to take on. Now, I'm not so sure with this whole like N'Zoth Control Mage thing, but I've also been having good results against Big Spell Mage, and the stats are showing that it's a favored matchup for my deck as well, because all those Mage AoEs don't really deal with Divine Shield very well, and that's where my deck can really thrive against that matchup. What's it? Spiteful Priest is great for us. Murloc Paladin is favored if you play it right. Secret Mage is really favored. Big Spell Mage is favored.
Combo
Zoo is
Priest, it
bad.
feels
Zoo is
favored
bad.
for you.
Zoo is secretly bad.
Well, if you're banning Warlock anyway, then it doesn't matter if there's Zoo
Right,
or
you kill two birds with one
so
stone.
yeah.
I mean, it's not really a
So-
secret, right? They play Voidwalker, Despicable Dreadlord, and stuff in between that's bigger than your stuff, and especially those lists that also have the 2-drop taunt, Vulgar Homunculus. You don't want to play against turn 1 taunt with a big butt, turn 2 taunt with a big butt, and then turn 5 play the thing that wipes your board every turn. That's not good for you.
Yeah, no, it's not pretty. So Warlock being banned in general just like really makes this deck powerful against the known field of decks. My one concern is that control, like you said, control Paladin saw some uptick in play, seeing play at High Legend, and I have a suspicion that it's going to be played in tournaments, and that deck is also pretty difficult customer for mine, because turns out their call to arms is way better than our call to arms, and they have Consecrates and Pyromancer. They have the Steeds and Lanessa. Like they have so many ways to kind of bog you down and never let you get in for damage, and they don't even have to win with the combo most of the time. They just kind of like out attrition you, and like eventually they can press their button and make some dudes, some horse dudes. And then your portrait explodes. Even without the combo, they just can outlast you and kill you.
Yeah, it turns out that decks with Wild Pyromancer seem pretty good against a bunch of 1/1s.
Yeah, who would have thought, man? AoE is good. That's why Warrior is also another deck. It's either any kind of these like Scourge Lord Garrosh, Deadman Ham, Fatigue-esque warriors that are running clears and can turn into Garrosh, which is just, like hero power, destroy your paladin board.
Sorry, I've never heard of any of these cards. What is this class? Warrior? Does it exist? I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, they're sometimes known for playing pirates, and other times they're known for playing wallets.
Oh man, now you're going back in the day.
Oodles of money. Deck.
Well, Zhandaly, thanks for such an exhaustive deep dive into Dude Paladin. The only question I have left is, how many hot dogs do you need to eat to hit Legend?
Well, that's a really good question. We're gonna have to ask my buddy. What's his name? Oh man, what's that dude's name? It's at the hot dog eating contest every year.
Oh, is it Joey Chestnut? Yeah.
That's it. Joey Chestnut.
And for those of you that don't know the meme, Zhandaly runs a tight ship over in competitive HS and had to delete one of the funniest comments in history. In that, what was it? It was the dude that said he was replying to comments.
Oh, it was this guy who posted about how he played for like 30-something hours straight when the season started to get Legend. And
Johnny
like
Black, right?
there was a point where he like stalled out at rank 9. Like on his climb, and he like couldn't figure out, like he was just like treading water, going 50-50, win lose, and he was like, and then I decided to stop, take a break, get up and eat some hot dogs, drink some water, and stretch, and I came back and win streak to 5. And there was like a comment on the thread that was like, and this is long, like exhaustive analysis on how to play and grind Hearthstone in long periods, and there's this guy who's like, TLDR, eat hot dogs, get Legend.
And you know what? It's true. It works. I ate a lot of hot dogs, and I've hit Legend a lot of times, so.
I mean, I don't think that's what his post ends up really boiling down to, but more power to you, man. I mean, that's the thing about Reddit that I hate, man. Everybody's just trying to, like, make a joke, get some internet points, this and that. Like, It's just like hard to use as a learning platform, and but we're trying our best to make it work.
Well, I think you've done an admirable job, and even deleting a comment as funny as that one shows your conviction. So, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about your baby here. And I'm certain we will be seeing a lot more of Dude Paladin, seeing as it's currently the highest ranked deck on Vicious Syndicate. But the one question we have left for today is one asked by our favorite 4-drop.
How long can this go on?
It's time for us to mosey on out of here, but before we do, and before I read the thanks, I do want to share one question that we have from Captain Picard himself. Well, it's probably not the Captain Picard, but his username is Cap Picard. Semantic question of the cast: why do you call them shoutouts and not coin concedes? Well, I don't have a good example for that, so we're going to do that today on the show. So for our outro, first of all, I want to give thanks to Stefan L. for letting us use his cover. Check him out in the channel or show notes. Big thanks to Hearthstone Top Decks and BeerBreak.com for deck lists, Hearthstone tournaments on YouTube for VODs. The show notes for this week's episode are on our website, coinconcede.com. You can support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live at twitch.tv/coinconcedepodcast. Join our chats in discord.coinconcede.com. Email us at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. And you can buy some stuff at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Reganis Prime, Calum CV, and...
It's so fluffy!
Fluffy! Thank you very much. And I would like to lead off here by coin conceding to my friend Sean Smoker. He's Sean Ryan5 on Twitter. He is an innovative deck builder that refuses to play by the rules of the establishment. He makes his own decks and does very well with them. And he came up with the term today. He called Defile a weapon of math destruction. And I thought that was so clever that I had to shout him out. So props to my buddy Sean Smoker. Bodicus, who you got? Who would you like to coin concede to?
I would like to coin concede this week again to Versika. Had said this last week, but just shout out to that guy, and especially shout out to the community that kind of came behind this. You know, they got that kind of nasty email that they read on the Hero Power show, and I'm just really glad to see kind of everybody coming behind Versika and really supporting him, because he does a really great job over there and definitely deserves to be on that cast. So yeah, just, you know, coin concede to him and everybody in the community to get behind him, because it was really awesome to see that on Twitter.
Cool. Yeah, Versika's a good dude. And Zhandaly, who do you have that you want to shout out? Anyone that comes to mind?
Yeah, shout out to all the people and that I hang out with every day and talk to every day in the competitive Hearthstone Discord that didn't believe in my deck. You guys are weak. I'm talking mad. I've been talking mad crap all week, man. I've been riding this high, and but I wanted to shout out to Muzzy for picking up the deck and working with me and streaming it, because that's what really kind of got it really out there in the first place. I mean, I think Reddit only has so much of a reach, and having some pros pick up the deck and play it was really cool. So shout out to all the people who trusted the deck and played it. Shout out to all of the community members at Competitive Hearthstone. You guys are really great and make the community an awesome experience for me to run. And shout out to Ben Brode. Nice step dancing, dude.
Oh man, that guy is so graceful.
That's about it from me.
All right. Well, and while you're going, where can people find you? I know we got a Twitter over at Zhandaly HS, and you're pretty commonly seen over at /r/competitivehs on Reddit. What other podcasts have you been on? Is there anything else you'd like to plug?
So I actually did an episode earlier today with Value Town. We briefly talked about Dude Paladin, but nowhere near as much as in depth as we did here, I don't think. It was kind of a, move along. We had some structured topic things, and Chanman kept us going along. But this was definitely a lot more in depth about the deck. As far as that goes, I mean, I don't really stream. I don't really. I write a little bit on competitive Hearthstone, so mostly just look out for my stuff there and look for me like trolling people on Twitter.
Sounds good, man. What about you, Bodicus?
So you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BodicusHS, and it'd be great if you followed me on Twitch. I've been pretty regularly streaming every weekend, because that's the time I have the most, or that's the most amount of time I have to play Hearthstones, and that's over at twitch.tv/Bodicus.
Yay. And then you can find me on Twitter at Ridiculous Hat. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/ridiculoushat. You can find me on Discord wherever Hearthstone is discussed. Just go ahead and tag me at Ridiculous Hat, and I will respond. Thank you very much, everyone, for being on here. Thank you so much for Zhandaly for joining us. Keep calm and rogue on. And if you see us on the ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Take cold comfort in your victory.
You win. I can rest now. You win. For now. Now, your victory proves nothing.
The day is yours.
I choose death. You have triumphed. This time.
This hunt is yours.